Thank you, Corey. Our next speaker is Dr. Aimee Bailey, Director of Decarbonization and Grid Innovation for Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Dr. Bailey is the Director of Decarbonization and Grid Innovation there, and her work centers around identifying and managing technical, economic, and regulatory barriers and opportunities to achieve decarbonization. Prior to SVCE, Aimee held positions focused on solar technology and policy, climate policy, emerging technologies, and strategic planning at the Environmental Defense Fund. Innovation Lab, Pacific Gas and Electric, City of Palo Alto Utilities, Global Environmental Institute in Beijing, and the U.S. Department of Energy. Aimee has a BSc in Materials Science from University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and a PhD in Physics from Imperial College in London. Please welcome Dr. Aimee Bailey.
All right, thank you very much for that kind introduction. I didn't know you were going to read the whole bio there. And thank you all for being here and really for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Crystal, for inviting me to speak a bit about what we're doing at Silicon Valley Clean Energy. And it's actually not just SVCE. I'll be talking about an effort that's in collaboration with Peninsula Clean Energy and actually other cities outside of the CCAs as well. So I'm going to give a little bit of background. I think probably the majority of people in this room are already familiar with us and have actually helped form us. But for those that aren't familiar, SVCE, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, we're a community choice energy provider. So that's the type of agency, a public agency that's formed by local jurisdictions to be the default electricity provider for those communities. And so we're made up of 13 local agencies listed here, including Cupertino, and also we have a few directors, a few member agency electeds in this room as well. So we were formed in 2016, began enrolling customers in 2017, and so we're quite new. We call ourselves a startup because we very much are a startup. And SVCE's mission is really focused on decarbonization. So we were formed by our communities to help our communities reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And we're doing that through the electricity supply by providing carbon-free electricity and also innovative programs for the community. And so for SVCE, we really identified all of the strategies and programs that we're pursuing to help achieve this decarbonization mission in this document, the Decarbonization Strategy and Programs Roadmap. So this was adopted by our board last December, along with a budget for an initial tranche of programs. And this particular document first really sets out what are the community emissions related to energy, and what sort of goals can we set as a community to help drive us towards zero emissions. So this is an inventory. So on the left here in 2015 and 2017, those are our historical emissions for the member agencies within our service territory. As you can see, the dark teal bars at the very bottom, we've made a lot of progress within our communities reducing emissions there. That's the emissions associated with electricity. And that's true really across the state. California's had very ambitious policies as it relates to moving towards renewable energy. We've made a lot of progress. However, there are a couple other very large buckets of emissions, specifically natural gas in orange, and then transportation at the very top in kind of the lighter blue. And so those are the ones that really form the vast majority of remaining emissions in our communities. And so our Decarb strategy and programs roadmap is really focused on not just electricity, but tackling those other two buckets of emissions. So the strategy that we're following really is this three-step process for achieving decarbonization, which is the broad consensus of the scientific community of how you go about eliminating emissions. And that's to say, first, decarbonize your electricity supply, which we've done. Electrify everything, specifically buildings and vehicles. and then do that while harnessing energy efficiency and maintaining grid integration. And so everything within our program's roadmap is kind of within that framework. So this particular presentation is focused really on the second step, and specifically buildings. But if you're interested in everything else that SVCE is doing, I'd encourage you to look at the roadmap for the full download. Okay, so moving forward to the specific effort that I'm here to speak with you about. So this is the REACH code effort. And so I mentioned this isn't actually just SVCE, so this is a collaboration with Peninsula Clean Energy, which is our counterpart serving San Mateo County, and also San Mateo County's Office of Sustainability Services. And so we partnered together to provide support for our 34 member agencies to look into REACH codes. So what is a REACH code? So for those of you familiar with building code in the state of California, building codes are updated every year on a every 3 years. There's a 3-year cycle. The next update is coming up January 1st, 2020. Although the state and the Energy Commission are responsible for what the energy provisions within the baseline code, we actually have, we being local jurisdictions, have the authority to do more. And so that's kind of why it's called a REACH code. You're allowed to go above and beyond actually what the state baseline code recommends. And so building codes, as you all know, dictate what sort of buildings can be built in your community. And by establishing a REACH code, you're able to achieve even more. Specifically, you can encourage all electric buildings, you can encourage EV charging infrastructure, and that's really the focus of this REACH code effort. So it's a two-pronged effort focused on both building electrification and then also charging infrastructure. So I'll provide a little bit more of the why before kind of delving into what the draft code's going to look like. So why adopt a REACH code? So you all know about the climate crisis, obviously, you're here. And all of our cities, in addition to us as a regional agency, have emissions reduction goals. This will help us achieve those emission reduction goals. And it also happens to be the case that all electric buildings are just typically cheaper, safer, and healthier, in addition to being better for the environment. So it's really not every day where kind of the stars align in this way. There's also a question of fiscal prudence, and I think that there were multiple speakers talking about that. If you believe that we are going to address climate change, all of the natural gas infrastructure in the state and buildings has to be replaced by electric infrastructure. So if you are building buildings now that include natural gas appliances, you are supporting a large number of stranded assets, and those communities, those homeowners, those business owners are going to have to spend thousands, collectively millions of dollars later on down the line to retrofit those. So there's a big fiscal prudence component to this. It also enables, the EV codes in specific enable much greater EV adoption rates. We obviously already have like super high EV adoption rates, but it's not really that high compared to what we need. I think you noticed the transportation emissions bucket within SVCE communities, they make up around half of the emissions of those communities. It's just a huge bucket, and we have to really adopt electric vehicles in a much higher rate in addition to mode shifting, specifically to walking, biking, etc. And the 2019 code, the baseline code that's going to be adopted in January 1st, are going to take effect January 1st. It certainly has made some progress in kind of dismantling a lot of the biases towards natural gas that had been baked into it over the past number of decades. But it's really not enough to sway the switch towards all electric. And just a few more things. SVCE and PCE, another reason to adopt a REACH code, especially if you're elected, so we're providing financial support. And so we've, with our member agencies, had identified this as a priority, and that's why it's a part of our decarbonization roadmap, and we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, or excuse me, hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars really on technical support to help support our member agencies that want to take leadership on this issue and really provide as much support as we can to those member agencies, to the authorities having jurisdiction that can actually adopt these codes. So there's, technical consultant support, SVCE, PCE staff support, and then also a $10,000 grant. And so if you sign a letter of intent, your city, saying that you're going to bring these REACH codes to your council for review, then we want to reward you for that. Like, we're providing as much assistance as we can, but we know there is a staff impact. You have to have a staff member help go through that city process. And so this is an acknowledgement of that and an attempt to provide and help defray some of that impact. Yeah, so there's also the potential with PCE and SVCE to help promote regional consistency in these codes, and also an opportunity to display local leadership. Just on this subject, for those of you familiar with building codes, you'll know this, but for those of you that aren't really in the thick of things, oftentimes it's these local amendments that really make their way into the baseline code. It's often the case. And so if you're adopting a REACH code through this process, that very well could be the default, the next building code cycle for the entire state. Okay, so for the guiding principles for REACH codes that we set out with were, first, preserve a low-cost compliance option to minimize impact on construction costs. And this is already, we're kind of well-positioned for this anyway, because all electric is typically cheaper than natural gas. You're not adding that additional utility service, but that had to be a guiding principle. We're in a housing crisis here, and we don't want to do anything to slow down the development of especially affordable housing. And we also want to encourage specifically, all electric specifically, the development of healthier, safer, and lower emissions buildings. And then the third guiding principle was really to reflect the values of our community. Specifically, we are kind of the epicenter of innovation. We're leaders in energy efficiency, EVs, solar and battery adoption rates, and the REACH codes would be a reflection of that. So I'm going to provide you an example of what the draft REACH code looks like for single-family residential. And just as far as timelines, so we released some draft REACH codes mid-April, so mid-last month. And then we've been collecting stakeholder feedback from our member agency staff, from developers, realtors, environmental advocates, and others. And all of that feedback was due May 15th, a few days ago. So we're in the process of revising these draft REACH codes, and they'll be released May 29th. So this is what was released in mid-April. I just want to give you a flavor for what it looks like. And so for this one, this is an example for a single-family home. The REACH code on the left is an all-electric pathway. And so what this example shows is that this all-electric pathway, you don't have to do anything above and beyond. If you are choosing all-electric, you just need to meet the baseline code, and then that's it. And that could be combined with one of two options that are mixed fuel. Mixed fuel in this case means both natural gas connection and electric connection. And this mixed fuel pathway option one says if you're gonna choose to install natural gas, then you can do so. It's more expensive because you have an additional utility service, but we need you to achieve a higher efficiency level to mitigate the emissions impacts that you're having. And then option two is that, but a step higher. So that's the structure of the proposed REACH codes last April. And that was specifically for single family, but there's a similar structure for multifamily and office and retail. And then based on conversations with our member agencies, we're also looking into medium and large commercial options. And yeah, we'll be releasing the updated draft and the actual language on May 29th. So we have a webinar scheduled for them. If anyone is interested, please let me know. So that was for the buildings track. If you recall, there's also the EV track. And so the proposed EV reach code is divided into sectors: single-family, multifamily buildings, and then non-residential. And so for single-family and multifamily, it basically goes above state code by saying you have to make EV charging infrastructure so-called plug-and-play. So you have to make sure you have enough panel capacity in those circuits installed, such that when the occupant or resident is ready for an EV charger, they don't have to spend thousands of dollars upgrading the infrastructure to then install the charger. And similar for non-residential buildings, what's proposed is a mixture of both installation of chargers themselves and then making parts, other sectors, so-called plug-and-play. Okay, so that was a brief summary. There's a lot more detail that we could get into there, and so I would encourage you to take a look in your agenda packet. I think it's on page 3. There's a one-pager that kind of summarizes the opportunity. On the second page of that one-pager, there's also my contact information, and then my colleague John Sups. And so if you have any questions at all or want to see kind of what the status is of your member agency, or if you are elected and want to make sure that you're a part of the loop, definitely let me know. And we can also provide more detail, as much detail as you'd like on kind of what the options are, and really sit down with you, even with our technical consultant. Okay, so just a brief recap of the reach code advantages. What's being proposed, and although I mentioned it's being updated now based on stakeholder feedback, but it preserves the lowest cost compliance option. It encourages all electric and safer, cleaner, healthier buildings. It provides a pathway for significant emissions reductions. It aligns EV infrastructure really with the adoption rates that we're seeing in our community. And it preempts future retrofitting costs and avoiding stranded assets. So we're currently going through the process of updating those codes, holding a number of different individual city meetings, developing tools. I should mention the PCE and SVCE support is not just for the development of the codes and helping our cities go through the review and adoption process. There's implementation support as well. And so we are not going to just let you adopt them and kind of leave you. So we have that definitely within the scope of work to help all of our cities actually implement this in a streamlined way. And then we're also carrying out some enhanced stakeholder engagement, meeting specifically with different industry groups that we want to make sure that we're incorporating their feedback. For instance, affordable housing developers, affordable housing advocates, realtors, builders, etc. And so all of this is taking place over the coming couple months, and it would really be in kind of the August to October timeframe that cities would be going through their process of bringing reach codes forward to their councils for a vote, and that would be for a January 1st implementation. And so since we're in Silicon Valley, it's not common in developer competitions to have a leaderboard, so this is our leaderboard. And I should mention that it was some of our board members that had asked for this information and our environmental advocates. And so here you have it. So this is SVCE on the left, and then PCE on the right, and then all of the different member agencies that then the second column, is whether they've submitted their letter of intent. And so you can kind of see the status of your city if you're within our service territory. And so you can see by these charts that SVCE is definitely winning. So if you're in PCE service territory, I'd encourage you to get in contact with me, and I can put you in contact with my counterpart at PCE. Okay, so that is really the ask, to ask your council to support this community effort, and really to promote this assistance that we're providing and to take advantage of it. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible And we certainly welcome any suggestions, so if there are additional things we could be doing to help out. All right, thank you very much.
I feel like
I'm Lesbia's from Palo Alto, and I feel obliged to tell you we have our own electrical power setup, as does Santa Clara. So just so I don't have to feel so guilty, we really have complied. Thanks.
I maybe would also mention, so we work very closely with our counterparts at Palo Alto Utilities, and I used to be there myself, and it's very near and dear to my heart. Those folks, I actually just spoke with Christine Tam, who's partly leading the REACH Code effort. So there's coordination even beyond, our CCA service territories with Palo Alto, and then also with San Jose, and then Santa Clara. Santa Clara also being an municipal electric utility. Thank you.
Thank you, Aimee.